So imagine waking up one morning and realizing your body has just completely forgotten how to make its own moisturizer.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that sounds terrible.
Right. And I don't just mean like the oil on your face or something. I'm talking about the essential structural hydration that keeps your skin from cracking
Right.
and, your internal tissues from tearing.
Right, the real foundational stuff.
Exactly. Like your whole biological ecosystem essentially just drying out overnight. It would be the sudden overnight desertification of your own biology.
That is a very visceral way to put it, but yeah, that's accurate.
Well, welcome to today's deep dive. We are looking at a really fascinating stack of sources from July 2026 clinical endocrinology, dermatology, and genitourinary studies.
Get through a great batch of papers
It
there.
really is. And our mission for this deep dive is to trace an exact and frankly mind-blowing physiological chain reaction. We want to answer this very specific question for you. What actually happens to your body's moisture when its backup hormone factory is suddenly surgically removed?
It is a profound shock to the system, honestly, and it completely reframes how we even think about the way our bodies maintain themselves.
Yeah, totally.
We are specifically looking at the aftermath of a bilateral adrenalectomy, which is the surgical removal of both adrenal glands.
Both of them. Yeah.
Right. And when you look at the clinical data surrounding this procedure, the cascading effects reveal this highly localized, invisible network that basically keeps the human body lubricated.
Which is wild, right? Because usually when we think of the adrenal glands, those two little triangular hats sitting on top of your kidneys.
Dress hats.
Right. We think of adrenaline. We think of the whole fight or flight response or cortisol and stress. But going through these papers, it struck me that we are completely ignoring their secret identity.
They really are.
They're basically the body's ultimate part supplier for our skin and our tissue health.
They absolutely are. And to really understand the loss of that moisture, we have to start by understanding the sudden loss of the raw materials right after that surgery.
Right, the sudden stop.
Exactly. So when a patient undergoes a bilateral adrenalectomy, they develop what's called primary adrenal insufficiency. Now, the medical community is, very well aware of the immediate dangers here.
Because you lose cortisol. Right.
Right. You lose cortisol, which manages metabolism and stress. You also lose aldosterone, which regulates salt and blood pressure. Those are the famous complications.
The ones that get all the attention.
Exactly. And patients have to go on immediate replacement therapy for those, or, they will enter a life-threatening crisis very quickly.
Wow. Okay.
But the unsung heroes that are lost in this surgery, the ones that they don't always get immediate replacement, are the adrenal androgens.
Right. I saw those mentioned heavily in the endocrinology papers. We're talking about DHEA, DHEAS, and androstenedione.
That's right.
Can you just break down what those actually are for us?
Certainly. So dehydroepiandrosterone, or DHEA, and its sulfated form, DHEAS, they are produced in massive quantities by the adrenal cortex.
Massive quantities.
Huge amounts.
Yeah.
But here is the critical catch. DHEA on its own is relatively inactive.
Inactive. Wait, really?
Yeah, it's what we call a prohormone. So if it just circulates in your blood and bumps into a cell, it exerts very, very weak effects all by itself. It basically needs to be processed.
Okay, let's unpack that. Because if the adrenals are churning out massive quantities of this inactive prohormone, it sounds kind of like, I don't know, like they're distributing a universal gift card rather than actual cash.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
But like the adrenals mail out this DHEA gift card in the bloodstream to every tissue in the body, and it's up to those individual cells to actually redeem it.
Right. They redeem it and convert it into whatever specific active hormone they happen to need at that exact moment.
That's crazy.
It is a highly accurate way to visualize it. And this reliance on the adrenal gift card, so to speak, is exactly why the surgical removal of the adrenals becomes so utterly devastating, particularly for women.
Oh, right, because of the supply differences.
Exactly. In men, the tests are the primary source of active androgens like testosterone. The adrenal contribution is much smaller in comparison.
But for women.
But the sources highlight that in women, the adrenal glands contribute up to 50% of the total androgen pool.
50%. I mean, that is half of their entire androgen supply.
Half of it gone.
So when a surgeon removes those glands, the body isn't facing some like gradual natural decline. It faces an immediate overnight androgen drought.
Yep.
The gift cards just literally stop arriving in the mail.
And that sudden stop It exposes a biological mechanism that is honestly nothing short of miraculous. It brings us to a concept in the literature called endocrinology.
Okay, I have to admit, I had never even heard the word endocrinology before reading these sources.
Most people haven't. It represents a major paradigm shift in how we understand hormones.
How so?
Well, for decades, classical endocrinology taught us this very specific model, right? Glands like the ovaries or testes secrete active hormones directly into the bloodstream, and then the blood carries those active hormones to target organs far away.
Like a broadcast.
Exactly. It's like a massive radio tower broadcasting a signal to the entire city. Everyone hears the exact same song.
Right, right.
But endocrinology is entirely different. It describes how tissues all over your body absorb that circulating inactive DHEA from the blood, and then they use local, highly specific enzymes to synthesize active androgens and estrogens right inside the specific cells where they are needed.
See, here's where it gets really interesting to me. It's less like a citywide radio broadcast and more like having an independent underground microbrewery inside your skin
A
cell.
microbrewery.
Right. Like the skin cell quietly brings in the raw ingredients from the blood, brews up the exact active, potent hormone it needs for its own use, uses it locally, and then just destroys the evidence.
That's exactly it. It is a completely closed-circuit system. The cell synthesizes the active sex steroids, exerts the biological effect within that very same cell, and then, crucially, inactivates the hormone.
Just breaks it right down.
Yeah, it turns it into a water-soluble metabolite so it can be safely excreted. It does all of this without ever releasing the active hormone back into the general bloodstream.
But wait, I have to push back on this a little bit.
Sure.
Because if a skin cell is brewing these highly potent sex steroids right there in the tissue, how does it guarantee they don't just leak out?
Ah, that's the big question.
I mean, the skin is incredibly vascular, right? It's packed with blood capillaries. If I'm brewing active DHT or estrogen in my skin, why isn't it spilling into my bloodstream and throwing my whole systemic hormone balance out of whack?
And that is the genius of the cellular machinery involved here. The enzymes that synthesize the active hormone are situated in very close proximity to the hormone receptors.
Oh, so they don't have to travel far.
Exactly. As soon as the active hormone, like DHT, binds to the receptor and delivers its message, the cell immediately unleashes a totally different set of enzymes to break it down.
Instantly.
Instantly.
Uh-huh.
It alters the chemical structure, usually adding a sulfate or glucuronide group, which makes the molecule water-soluble.
And once it's water soluble.
Once it is water-soluble, it cannot easily bind to receptors anymore. It's essentially neutralized before it ever has a chance to diffuse out of the cell and cross into a capillary. It is a strictly one-way trip.
Wow. Okay, so that answers my question, but it also brings up something that seems like a massive clinical blind spot, honestly.
Oh, absolutely.
If these active hormones are trapped in this closed circuit and never go back into the blood, does that mean standard blood tests aren't actually capturing how hormonally starved our skin tissues are after an adrenalectomy?
You've hit on one of those critical issues in these sources.
Yeah.
Standard blood tests completely miss the localized intracrine formation of these hormones.
They just miss it entirely.
Entirely. A phlebotomist draws your blood and looks at circulating levels of the precursor, DHEA, or maybe total testosterone. But the real magic and the real crisis, when that DHEA stops arriving from the adrenals, happens invisibly at the local tissue level.
Right, where the test can't see it.
Exactly. A patient's skin and mucous membranes can be entirely depleted of active androgens, suffering this severe cellular drought. But the classical blood work might not fully reflect the severity of that local starvation.
Because it's only measuring what's on the highway, basically.
Yes, it measures the highway, not what's happening inside the factories.
That is terrifying, honestly. You could be looking at a piece of paper telling you your levels are acceptable while your skin is literally collapsing.
It's a huge problem for these patients.
So let's zoom in on one of those specific local microbreweries that gets boarded up and shut down by this surgery. The dermatology papers we read spend a lot of time on something called the pilosebaceous unit. What exactly is happening there?
Right, so the pilosebaceous unit consists of your hair follicle and the sebaceous gland attached to it. The cells inside that gland, known as sebocytes, are absolute masters of endocrinology.
Okay, so they're the expert brewers.
Exactly. They express very specific steroidogenic enzymes to convert the DHEA gift card into active molecules. When DHEA arrives from the bloodstream, the sebocyte uses an enzyme called 3-beta-hydroxysteroid dehydrogenase, or just 3-beta-HSD.
Yeah, I saw that enzyme mentioned everywhere in the reading. What does it actually do to the molecule?
Well, essentially, a dehydrogenase, it strips away hydrogen atoms. It chemically reshapes that relatively flat, inactive DHEA molecule into a new structure called androstenedione.
And then what?
Then a second enzyme steps in, specifically 5-alpha reductase type 3. This enzyme further modifies the molecule, adding hydrogen in very specific places to convert it into dihydrotestosterone, or DHT.
Yeah, DHT is the heavy hitter, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It is the most potent androgen in the human body. In the sebaceous gland, DHT is the primary stimulant for sebum production. It binds to the androgen receptors inside the sebocyte and tells the cell to rapidly multiply, differentiate, and eventually burst open, releasing all of its contents as sebum.
Okay, I think we should clarify what sebum actually is because the sources go out of their way to distinguish it from just like basic moisture.
It's definitely not just water.
Right. I think most of us just think of it as face grease, you know? But the breakdown in the paper shows it's a highly complex, lipid-rich substance. It's packed with triglycerides, wax esters, squalene, and cholesterol.
And it's quite the cocktail.
So how does that cocktail actually keep the skin hydrated?
Well, sebum functions as a highly specialized biological barrier. Water naturally wants to evaporate into the air, right?
Sure.
So the primary function of that complex lipid cocktail is to provide a hydrophobic or water-repelling coating over the surface of the skin and the hair shaft.
Oh, like a seal.
Exactly like a seal. This coating drastically reduces what dermatologists refer to as transepidermal water loss, or TEWL. It physically seals the moisture inside your epidermis. Without that heavy lipid layer, the water inside your skin simply vaporizes right into the environment, leaving the tissue totally compromised.
It is deeply ironic when you think about it.
How so?
Well, we spend our entire teenage years fighting androgens to stop oily skin and acne, right? We buy every harsh wash and scrub to strip that exact sebum away.
Oh, right, true.
But this surgery, the bilateral adrenalectomy, it proves that a baseline level of these exact same androgens, specifically that local DHT, is the only thing standing between you and severe xerosis.
And xerosis is the clinical term for painfully dry, flaky, irritated skin that has completely lost its barrier function.
It sounds miserable.
It is. When you lose the adrenals, the sebocytes lose their DHEA supply. The local DHT production grinds to a halt, the sebocytes stop producing those complex lipids, and your skin's moisture barrier literally evaporates. The skin just becomes thin, fragile, and highly susceptible to cracking and infection.
Okay, so if this microbrewery shutdown is happening on the external skin, it makes me wonder about the body's internal tissues that rely on moisture. Moving from the outside in, are our internal mucosal surfaces facing the exact same supply chain failure?
They absolutely are. And the genitourinary impact detailed in the sources is honestly staggering.
I can imagine.
The vulvovaginal tissues are highly dependent on the exact same principles of endocrinology we just discussed for the skin. In fact, post-menopause, or in this specific case, post-adrenalectomy, the adrenal glands are the exclusive source of precursors for both estrogens and androgens in the vaginal mucosa.
The exclusive source.
Yeah.
So the vaginal epithelial tissues have their own local microbreweries as well, pulling DHEA from the blood to stay hydrated.
Yes, they do.
Yeah.
The epithelial cells lining the vagina take up DHEA and use their own local enzymes to convert it into active estrogens and androgens. And it's these locally produced estrogens that keep the vaginal epithelium thick, heavily vascularized, and healthy.
Okay, so what happens when it starts?
Well, without the adrenal DHEA arriving, we see a dramatic thinning of the mucosa. The tissue physically shrinks and loses its outermost layer of superficial epithelial cells.
I noticed the sources mentioned those superficial cells are critical because of something called glycogen. Could you explain the connection there? Like, why does losing superficial skin cells matter so much? And what does glycogen have to do with vaginal health?
Yeah, it is a truly fascinating symbiotic relationship. In a healthy state, fueled by local estrogen, the vaginal lining is thick and constantly shedding its outermost superficial cells, much like how the skin on your arm sheds.
Right, constantly renewing.
Exactly. As these specific vaginal cells shed and break down, they release large amounts of glycogen, which is a stored form of glucose or sugar.
Okay, sugar.
This glycogen serves as the primary food source for the local microbiome, specifically the lactobacilli.
Oh, the healthy commensal bacteria.
Correct. The lactobacilli consume that glycogen, and as a byproduct of their metabolism, they produce lactic acid.
Ah, acid.
Right. This lactic acid is what keeps the vaginal environment highly acidic, usually maintaining a pH of around 3.5 to 4.5. And that acidity is a critical evolutionary defense mechanism. Very few pathogens can actually survive in an environment that acidic.
Okay, so let's trace this cascade, because the domino effect here is incredibly severe when you map it out.
It really is.
You lose the adrenals, which means you lose the DHEA precursor. Without DHEA, the vaginal cells can't synthesize estrogen locally. Without estrogen, the tissue thins out, and you stop shedding those glycogen-rich superficial cells.
Yep, you lose the food source.
Suddenly, the lactobacilli have no food. They starve and die off,
And when the lactobacilli die, the lactic acid production stops entirely.
which means the pH changes.
Exactly. Without the acid, the vaginal pH rises,
Mhm.
often creeping up above 5.0.
And the acidic shield is just gone, completely opening the gates for opportunistic pathogens.
Precisely. An elevated pH allows bacteria that shouldn't be there, particularly E. coli migrating from the gastrointestinal tract, to colonize the area and really thrive.
Oh, wow.
This is why patients in this state suffer from recurrent urinary tract infections, abnormal discharge, and severe irritation. The biological ecosystem just collapses.
But it's not just the surface lining and the microbiome failing, is it? You're talking about a loss of structural hydration, too. What is happening underneath the surface, like in the actual tissue architecture?
That's a crucial point. To understand the structural failure, we have to look just below the epithelium at a connective tissue layer called the lamina propria.
The lamina propria, okay.
This layer is packed with fibroblasts, which are basically the biological cellular factories responsible for producing collagen and elastin.
Right, and collagen gives tissue its strength, and elastin gives it the ability to stretch and recoil.
Exactly. The sources detail that androgens, again, locally produced from DHEA, are what actually stimulate these fibroblasts to keep producing those structural proteins. Without those local androgens, the fibroblasts basically just go dormant.
They just shut down production. The papers used a very specific medical term for what happens to the collagen next. They said the fibers hyalinize. What does that actually look like physically?
Well, when fibroblasts go dormant, they turn into inactive cells called fibrocytes. Because they are no longer actively maintaining the tissue matrix, the existing collagen fibers begin to deteriorate.
And that's hyalinization.
Right. Hyalinization means those individual flexible collagen fibers essentially glue themselves together into this stiff, glassy, homogeneous mass. And simultaneously, the elastin fibers just fragment and break apart.
So the tissue literally loses its physical scaffolding. It loses its elasticity, its ability to stretch, and its blood flow.
It becomes incredibly rigid and fragile. The clinical result of this combined surface and structural failure is known as genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or GSM, also referred to as vulvovaginal atrophy.
That sounds incredibly painful.
It is. For a patient who has undergone an adrenalectomy, this translates into severe dryness, burning, itching, and dyspareunia, which is severe pain during sexual intercourse. It profoundly impacts a woman's quality of life. The tissue is so compromised and rigid that it can tear and bleed with just minimal friction.
And as you pointed out earlier, in the case of a bilateral adrenalectomy, this isn't a slow transition that happens over a decade like natural menopause.
No, not at all.
It is an abrupt, immediate plunge into severe deficiency because the surgeon just removed the only remaining supply of the precursor hormone.
It is an iatrogenic or medically induced crisis.
Yeah.
The local factories are perfectly healthy, but the supply trucks simply stop showing up one morning.
So we have this devastating drought on the outside, with the skin's sebum disappearing and a structural collapse on the inside, with the mucosal tissues thinning, stiffening, and losing their acidic defense shield.
A total collapse, yes.
But knowing exactly how this localized, closed-circuit intracrine system fails post-surgery, can we hack it? I mean, if the microbreweries are still there, can clinicians just give them their raw materials back?
Yes. And this is where the science in these 2026 papers gets truly elegant.
Oh, good. Some hope.
Right. Because we now understand endocrinology, we realize we don't need to flood the patient's entire systemic bloodstream with heavy doses of active testosterone or estrogen to fix a localized problem.
We don't need the radio tower.
Exactly. We can use targeted therapies that leverage the cell's own localized machinery. The prime example explored in our genitourinary sources is intravaginal DHEA, specifically a daily insert known clinically as prasterone.
Okay, so instead of taking a pill that gets digested, processed by the liver, and broadcast to the whole body like that radio tower, you are basically just dropping the DHEA gift cards right at the front door of the local factory.
That is the exact mechanism. When DHEA is delivered directly into the vaginal mucosa, the local epithelial cells greedily take it up. They use their specific localized enzymes to resume converting it into active estrogens and androgens.
And the factory starts back up.
Precisely. The local estrogen restores the thickness of the epithelium. The cells start shedding again, the glycogen production resumes, the lactobacilli to return to feed on it, and the acidic pH normalizes.
Wow.
And simultaneously, those locally produced androgens wake up the dormant fibroblasts in the connective tissue underneath, reversing that hyalinization, increasing collagen density, and restoring the tissue's overall elasticity.
And because it's utilizing that closed-circuit system we talked about earlier, the active hormones stay right where they are needed. They don't leak out.
That is the most brilliant aspect of this treatment. The clinical data strongly confirms that 95% of the active hormones synthesized in the vaginal mucosa from this treatment are inactivated right at the site of synthesis.
95%.
Yes, they do their vital structural work inside the cell, and then the cell breaks them down into inert, water-soluble metabolites before they can ever cross into the general circulation.
That is incredible. I mean, it means you can completely rebuild this collapsed ecosystem without causing massive systemic side effects.
None.
You aren't going to accidentally stimulate the endometrium or increase the risk of systemic hormone issues because the active hormones never make it into the bloodstream in meaningful amounts. It is the definition of hyperlocal medicine.
It is a perfect therapeutic application. It respects and utilizes the body's natural, localized regulatory systems rather than trying to, override them with brute force.
It really changes how you view your own biology.
It does.
To briefly recap this incredible chain reaction for you listening, we started with the surgical removal of the adrenal glands, which leads to a sudden, catastrophic halt in the production of the DHEA prohormone.
The gift cards stop.
Right. And that raw material shortage shuts down the highly localized intracrane factories in your individual cells. On the external skin, the sebocytes stop making DHT, the complex lipid sebum production crashes, and your skin loses its hydrophobic barrier, leading to severe transepidermal water loss and dryness.
And internally.
Internally, the vaginal mucosa loses its local supply of estrogens and androgens, causing the tissue to thin, the protective microbiome to starve and collapse, the pH to spike, and the structural collagen to glue together into a stiff, fragile mass.
And every single step of that devastating cascade traces back to the loss of a single precursor hormone that, for a very long time, classical medical science considered relatively unimportant.
It's crazy. It really does remind you why all of this matters. Even if you never need the specific surgery, you aren't just one big vat of hormones mixed together in your blood responding to a central command from the brain.
Far from it.
Your body is a collection of hyperlocalized, self-regulating microecosystems. Your skin cells and your mucosal cells are making autonomous decisions every second of the day, pulling in raw materials, brewing up incredibly powerful sex steroids, using them to build structural scaffolding, and then destroying the evidence, all without the brain or the bloodstream ever even knowing it happened.
It is a vast, decentralized network of biological intelligence.
Which leaves me with a pretty wild final thought.
Oh.
Yeah. If our skin and our mucous membranes are secretly running these invisible, highly localized chemical ecosystems, producing and destroying potent hormones entirely under the radar of standard blood tests, what other invisible, localized ecosystems exist inside our major organs?
That's a great question.
Are our hearts or our brains quietly brewing their own specific hormones right now, completely hidden from the blood work we rely on every year?
That is exactly the frontier that molecular endocrinology is just beginning to explore.
Definitely something to mull over the next time you put on a simple moisturizer. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.